One of the things Republicans say is a priority for them is investigating your family, your son Hunter, your brother Jim. They talk about access that they say others have gotten because of you, because of your political success. How do you plan to deal with that?
The public's not going to pay attention to that. They want these guys to do something. If the only thing they can do is make up things about my family, it's not going to go very far.
I love how she asked the question. You know what? We're going to ask Emma Jo about this. Joining me now, Emma Jo Morris, Breitbart News political editor, and the one who broke the Hunter Biden laptop story. Emma Jo, this kills me the way the reporters asked the question. So dismissive of it already, just gearing up to fight for them. These Republicans and their icky questions about that, obviously fake laptop.
Yeah, very, very gently too. Very gently for their king of the establishment, Joe Biden. Yeah, no, it's. I mean, the press has really disgraced themselves. I think that they are probably, like, maybe more than the Bidens, the biggest casualty of this whole saga is how they've really just been exposed as actual political operatives. Like, it's not even partisan press. Like, that's too light. And you know, the way that he says the alleged or whatever, you know, like he dismisses it and she's just like, yes, that's right. It's all lies. That's right. I mean, we have it in writing. So this is just like another straw on that camel's back of the media just looking like absolute fools. They look like fools. And, you know, this is kind of all like Joe Biden hasn't received the most updated memo, which James Clapper transmitted the other day, right? When he says, to his now colleague at CNN, Natasha Bertrand, he kind of blasted her for, if you recall that letter published, I think on October 17th, just a few days after we published the laptop from hell at the Post, right, where they were like, this is Russian disinformation. 51 former intelligence officials say so. And that was used to buttress the narrative by the media and by social media about why we weren't allowed to read this or talk about it or something. That the laptop from hell is Russian disinformation. And then Joe Biden used that on the debate stage as well. And Clapper now has come out and said, oh, Natasha Bertrand lied about what I said. I didn't say that. I said that I didn't know, even though he was on CNN saying that he did know, and that is what he was saying. But anyway, there's some people who are now trying to reorient the narrative around this, that no, it wasn't Russian disinformation actually, and you know, it's real, but it's just not that bad, or it doesn't prove anything. But they're really like, they're scrambling now because as obviously we know, the Congress is investigating this, and they're giving the Biden family a rectal exam, and the FBI for that matter. And as it turns out, it wasn't Russian disinformation at all. And not only was it not true, but it is what it looks like, obviously.
I'm glad you brought that up about the media, because this is one thing that drives me insane about the right. The right is so fond of saying things like, oh, they're so biased, or imagine if a Republican did this. They're not biased. They're not left. They're not liberal. They're actively hostile against you, and they hate everything you care about. I don't know why we have such a hard time acknowledging this.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And you know, they not only do they not care, or not only do they hate you, but you are an other. You're an other. You're a rube. You're an idiot. And maybe that information is true, but Joe Biden needs to be president because we say so. And with that mentality comes, you know, justifying that behavior, which is lying, obfuscating, curating, and running interference for political candidates and people in power who they favor. It's not bias. That's silly. It's like, you know, bias, like that's just like an opinion that you hold that maybe colors like your view of the world or whatever. This is not that at all. They are operating on behalf of a security state. This is an operation that they're a part of and that they're active in.
You are a journalist. I am not. I am one of those idiots. I'm not a journalist. You are. And so I'm trying to figure out how I would take it if I put in the time, I broke a story like this, which this is honestly, if we had a media that wasn't hostile to us, this is one of the big stories, not just of the year, of the decade. The president's son, hostile foreign ties. It looked really bad, and yet was squashed so hard by all the powers that be. What was that like as a journalist. You break the something that in a normal world would win you a Pulitzer and instead dismissed. Was that wild, hurtful, angering? What was it?
It was definitely, okay, so this is how I think about it. It was totally mind-blowing, of course, and infuriating in certain ways, of course, because I wrote a story that I knew was newsworthy and was important. I mean, I actually wasn't a reporter, I was an editor, so I'm looking at it as an editor and I'm like, this is the story of the election. People called it an October surprise. Like, it happened to have come out in October, but I published as soon as I could when I was able to verify and go with, to print with what I had. It wasn't like I timed this in any sort of political way. And then that being said, it's so I was infuriated with it. I was disgusted with it, obviously, as somebody who believes in a free press and who was working at the time for a paper founded by Alexander Hamilton. It's think about that. But, yes, all of that for sure. But at the same time, it's I am not how I describe the rest of the media. I'm not a political operative. So this story happened to have worked in Trump's favor. But first of all, I would have published it if it was Don Jr., 100%. Maybe I would have even gone harder because at least Joe Biden is obvious and open about the fact that he's a creature of the establishment and a globalist, whereas Trump would have been doing the opposite, saying the opposite while he would have been doing that. Anyway, I would have published it no matter what. But the way I look at it is, I wasn't doing this for the Trump campaign. I wasn't doing this to be political. I was publishing the story that I had, and it was about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. And then when they censored it, that was a huge moment in American consciousness, right? Because what we learned and what we're continuing to learn even till this day, 2 years later, is that we had an illusion of a social media platform and of a press that was private. And what it really was, which was revealed in all of this, was that no, this is a cutout for the federal government to decide what we can talk about and what we can read about. And now we've learned that Twitter was co-opted by the FBI, and that the FBI was the one that planted that seed for them to censor it months in advance when they knew that the laptop was going to come out, right? That's what we learned in the Twitter files. And then they were the ones that came up with the narrative also for people like Brian Stelter and Jeff Zucker at CNN to call this a right-wing conspiracy and Russian disinformation. That was all originated in the FBI. So as a journalist, I look at this and yes, obviously it's infuriating to have your work undermined like that and censored like that when you wrote it for the American public to make an informed decision about voting, right? But at the same time, it's no, this exposed the real scandal, which is even bigger than the Biden family, much bigger than the Biden family. The real scandal is that the FBI is performing an operation internally, an intelligence operation internally. That is a scandal of historic proportions. It's bigger than the Bidens.
I keep telling people this. The FBI is the story here. The federal law enforcement arm is now officially a protection racket on behalf of Democrats and against Republicans. You actually don't have a country anymore. The country's already finished, which actually brings me to one final thing on the Biden end of this. This Biden University of Delaware story that you have, China, donations to University of Delaware as soon as Joe Biden starts his institute there. You know what this reminds me of, Emma Jo? This reminds me of the Clintons when Hillary was Secretary of State and all of a sudden the Clinton Foundation was getting these gigantic donations from foreign entities, and it was just so obviously dirty and corrupt to everybody with a set of eyes. This reminds me of that.
Oh yeah, and it reminds them of that. They talk about that in the emails when they're discussing it, that they want to take the model of the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative. That's not lost on the Bidens either, let me tell you. But this is, what is the University of Delaware? You know what I mean? All of a sudden, this becomes of intense interest to the Chinese government and to individuals linked with the Chinese government, where they're all of a sudden funneling millions of dollars. I mean, I don't know that there's a lot of members of the Chinese government that give away money for free. So that in and of itself ought to raise questions. But really, it's there's smoke there because they were obviously had no interest in the University of Delaware, probably the most random university in America. I don't know of any notable alumni other than maybe Joe Biden who went there. It's like, what? And so they all of a sudden start sending millions of dollars to this university. And reported last night, the FBI has taken documents from the University of Delaware.
What a shock. Emma Jo Morris, go read her stuff if you want to be informed. Thank you, Emma Jo. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.